Okay, let's try to understand Theorem 2.2.2. Do you remember in class how we've talked about left-hand limits, right-hand limits, and then the two-sided limit? We've also talked about infinite limits, approaching positive infinity and negative infinity. Because we have all of these possibilities, if we wanted to write this out as precise as possible, this theorem would be 2 pages long. And so in order to avoid that length, that unnecessary length, what we do at the very beginning is we say let lim stand for one of the limits that we've talked about so far. So what we're doing is we're letting lim be a shortcut word that stands for any one of the things that we've talked about thus far. Now if L1, which is a constant, is the limit of f of x, and L2 is the limit of g of x, if both exist, then the following 5 points must be true. And so these following 5 points are going to be foundational in taking the next step in calculus in understanding the limit. So let's go through the 5 points first mathematically using the mathematical symbols, and then we're going to try and understand them verbally. Okay? First one, part A. The limit of a sum is equal to the sum of the limits, L1 plus L2. That's the first point. Second point, the limit of a difference is equal to the difference of the limits, which is L1 minus L2. The limit of a product is equal to the product of the limits, which is L1 times L2. The limit of a quotient is equal to the quotient of the limits, L1 over 2, provided that L2 is not the number 0, because then we would get undefined. And the limit of a root, an nth root, is equal to the nth root of the limit of the function, which is the nth root of L1. If you have an even root, like the second root, fourth root, sixth root, and so on, then you have to provide this extra condition that L1 is greater than or equal to 0, otherwise you get an imaginary number. And as far as we're concerned in this level of calculus, we're only concerned about real numbers. Okay? That's Theorem 2.2.2. Those are the mathematical representations of how these limits work. Now let's look at the verbal explanations. Point 1. The limit of a sum is the sum of the limits. Point 2. The limit of a difference is the difference of the limits. Point 3. The limit of a product is the product of the limits. Point 4. The limit of a quotient is the quotient of the limits, provided the limit of the denominator is not 0. And point 5. The limit of an nth root is the nth root of the limits.